8 months ago, my uncle shoved me into a wall for standing up for my mom and mocked me, saying no one would believe a teenager. He bragged about the money he'd make selling her pills. Yesterday, I watched him counting dirty cash on the porch, while she sat behind the glass, lifeless and hollow-eyed. This isn't just a story about losing someone. It's about fighting a ghost. About the chilling realization that some monsters aren't under your bed. They're in your family, lurking in plain sight, ready to destroy everything you love for a few measly dollars. It's about a war for my mother's life and a system that almost let the villain win. 3 hours. That's how long the screech of brakes and the acrid smell of burnt rubber haunted me as I sat in that sterile hospital waiting room. My mom, my beautiful, brilliant mom, had walked straight into rush hour traffic on Highway 101, calling for my dad, who'd been gone for 3 years. 7 cars piled up trying to avoid her. Somehow, miraculously, she only had scratches. But I knew, deep down, everything was about to change. Mom used to be the best surgical nurse, a force of nature, until a faulty piece of hospital equipment exploded and with it shattered her incredible mind. The hospital, in their infinite wisdom, paid us to stay quiet about the brain injury that triggered her dementia. Dad, bless his soul, managed her 12 medications, shielding both of us from the world until his own heart gave out 3 years ago. I found him in the garage, gone, while Mom wandered outside, calling for a dog that had died years before. That night, at 14, I became her caregiver. And then, the social worker's words. They hit me like a physical blow, making my blood run cold. They'd found Mom's only living relative, Uncle Anthony. The man Mom had cut out of her life 15 years ago. He stumbled into the hospital, reeking of bourbon, and his first question wasn't about Mom's well-being. No, it was, how long has she been herself? Then the administrator, oblivious, mentioned Mom's $8,000 monthly disability payments. I watched, horrified, as pure, unadulterated greed transformed Anthony's face. Suddenly, he was preaching about family duty, his hand on my shoulder leaving behind the stench of alcohol. When I tried to explain Mom's complex medication schedule, he just waved me off, totally dismissing me. This man, who couldn't keep a houseplant, alive, was now in control of my mother's life. It was a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. Anthony's house? It was a biohazard, I swear to God. Mold climbed the bathroom walls like some insidious vine, and beer cans towered beside his recliner like monuments to neglect. Mom's new room was a closet, literally, reeking of motor oil. He locked her medications in his bedroom, then vanished to casinos for 10-hour stretches, leaving her completely alone, utterly confused. Her anti-inflammatory diet became gas station hot dogs. When she had violent episodes, he just locked her door. I heard her crying for help, sobbing while he sat in the living room, watching TV, completely indifferent. The caseworker visited. Once, just once. Anthony had staged everything perfectly, painting me as the troubled teen with control issues. She wrote in her report that I seemed resistant to change, never knowing the truth, never seeing the hell Mom was living in. Then, I caught him, in the garage selling Mom's pain pills to his poker buddies. The rage, it just boiled over. When I confronted him, he slammed me against the wall, his words still echoing in my head. Nobody believes angry teenagers. That night, something in me snapped. I started stealing from his wallet to buy Mom's medications. I started skipping school, sneaking through windows just to care for her. I started documenting everything, watching her disappear, piece by agonizing piece. Some nights she'd briefly recognize me, her eyes clearing for a fleeting moment and whisper, "My baby," before the fog returned. Those moments, they were my lifeline. As my 18th birthday loomed, I discovered something incredible. Mom's settlement included full coverage at an excellent memory care facility. It was a solution, a real path forward. But when I presented it, Anthony showed his true, monstrous nature. He'd been building a case against me. He had documented my absences, my thefts. Then he showed me eviction papers already prepared. The second I turned 18, I was out. No tenant could visit his sister without his permission. This was never about family. It was about those monthly checks, about the life insurance. He actually said it out loud. "She has maybe a year left. 1 year of payments, then a nice payout. My birthday arrived, not with celebration, but with a sheriff's escort. Mom called my name, her voice raw with fear, as they forced me out. It shattered me. I lasted 2 days, 2 agonizing days before I went back. I watched him leave her alone for 14 hours straight, until at 3 a.m, she wandered outside, calling for Dad. I broke in. I had to. He filed a restraining order. Now I was legally barred from protecting her. I paid a nursing student to check on her secretly. She found bed sores, severe dehydration. APS said their investigation was pending. Pending. I was desperate. I contacted Nancy, Mom's former head nurse. She handed me an envelope Mom had left years ago, a safety deposit box key. My hands shook as I opened that box. Inside, the truth screamed at me. Police reports, medical records from when Grandma died under Anthony's care, photos showing her skeletal, 87 pounds, covered in bed sores. Bank statements proved he'd stolen her Social Security. Pharmacy records showed medications unfilled for months. And then the smoking gun, an APS substantiation letter confirming neglect and recommending prosecution. But Grandma died before trial, and without a living victim, the case was dropped. Mom's note revealed the chilling truth. Anthony had stopped Grandma's heart medication, knowing 3 days without it would be fatal. He refilled it after she died to cover his tracks, collected $47,000 in life insurance, kept her house. Mom had saved everything because she knew. She knew he'd try again. Denise at Legal Aid remembered the case immediately. That old substantiation, combined with current evidence, meant we could file for emergency guardianship. The restraining order, perversely, actually strengthened our case by showing his isolation tactics. Tomorrow, I'd walk into Legal Aid armed with proof that Anthony had killed for money before. But as I drove past the house one last time, saw him on the porch counting cash from med sales, while Mom stared blankly through the window. The same system that failed Grandma was about to decide Mom's fate. I had evidence. I had lawyers. I had witnesses. What I didn't have was time. Because somewhere in that moldy house, my mother was dying. And the man who killed his own mother, for profit, was her guardian. The only question was whether justice would come fast enough, or if history would repeat itself while the system slowly churned through paperwork and procedures designed to protect families, not destroy them. It still hurts to talk about. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 8 a.m. sharp. Legal Aid opened in 30 minutes. I'd spent the entire night organizing every document, making backup copies, rehearsing what I'd tell Denise. My hands trembled as I dialed her direct line, ready to schedule an emergency appointment. The receptionist answered instead. Denise had called in sick. Something about a family emergency. My stomach dropped. In 3 years of working together, she'd never missed a day. I asked when she'd be back. The receptionist didn't know. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Sleep well, kid. My blood turned to ice. Only Anthony called me kid. Another message followed. Heard your lawyer friend got a scary phone call last night. Something about nosy lawyers getting hurt. Shame. I threw on yesterday's clothes and raced to Legal Aid, arriving 15 minutes before opening. Other clients already waited. An elderly woman clutching eviction papers, a young mother bouncing a crying baby. Normal people with normal problems, not like mine. The doors opened and we filed inside. I approached the desk asking about backup, attorneys for Denise's cases. The receptionist started explaining the wait time when the door chimed behind me. That familiar bourbon stench hit me before I even turned around. Anthony. He walked in, wearing his only clean shirt, the one he saved for court appearances. He approached the desk with practiced concern. He needed help with a family matter. His teenage nephew was stalking his dying sister, making wild accusations. The receptionist's eyes darted between us. My chest tightened. His breathing had this wet, rattling quality. The exact same sound described in Grandma's final medical records. The death rattle that haunted her last 3 days after he stopped her heart medication. He was doing it again. The words exploded from me before I could stop them. I pointed at him, my voice cracking, telling everyone he was a murderer, that he killed his mother, and now he was killing mine. That he sold her medications and left her alone to die. The waiting room went silent. The receptionist's hand moved to the panic button. Other clients pressed against walls, mothers pulling their children closer. Security arrived in seconds. 2 guards who knew me from previous visits now saw me as the threat. Anthony stepped back, hands raised peacefully, playing the victim perfectly. A paralegal emerged from the back offices. Sarah. She'd helped with our initial paperwork. She touched my shoulder gently, guiding me away from the desk. She'd heard about Denise calling in sick. Strange timing, she said. She wanted to help, but had her own crisis. Her diabetic daughter needed pickup from school in an hour. The school had a strict policy. 3 late pickups meant expulsion. She'd already had 2. Sarah could review my case, maybe file emergency motions, but only if someone could get her daughter. Without that, she'd have to leave for the school run and wouldn't be back until tomorrow. My choice. Wait for another attorney who might not see me today, or help her to gain an ally. I glanced at Anthony. He rubbed his wrist absently, right where Grandma's medical records noted defensive scratches. She'd fought him at the end, tried to stop him from taking her pills. The gesture was unconscious, automatic when he felt stressed. Sarah's daughter attended Jefferson Middle 20 minutes away. If I left now, I could get her and be back within an hour. But that meant leaving Anthony here, alone, with full access to legal aid services. The same building housed the courthouse. He could file anything while I was gone. I made my choice. I gave Sarah my keys, told her to wait in my car. I'll be back with your daughter as fast as possible. She squeezed my hand, grateful. At least someone still believed I was trying to help. The school pickup line stretched around the block. Parents in minivans checked phones while kids streamed out. I spotted Sarah's daughter by her bright purple backpack and insulin pump. She looked confused, but got in when I explained her mom sent me. My phone exploded with notifications on the drive back. 3 missed calls from Mom's pharmacy, 2 from my old high school, 1 from my cousin. I couldn't check them while driving, but dread settled in my stomach like lead. We hit every single red light, inching back to legal aid. Sarah's daughter chatted about her science project, completely unaware of my escalating panic. By the time we arrived, 45 minutes had passed. Sarah met us at the door, relief flooding her face, then her expression changed. While I was gone, Anthony had filed paperwork downstairs, harassment charges, a restraining order modification. He'd painted himself as a devoted caregiver, terrorized by a delusional teenager. The security footage from this morning supported his claims, me pointing, yelling, calling him a murderer, while he stood there, calmly. The pharmacy called again, while Sarah explained. Mom's medications needed refills, but they required guardian authorization. Anthony had already called them, expressing concerns about my attempts to access her prescriptions. They'd flagged my name in their system. My phone rang. The school attendance officer. I'd missed too many days. Truancy hearing scheduled for next week. Another call immediately. My cousin, frantic. Anthony was at Mom's house with a briefcase, full of paperwork. Something about power of attorney modifications. I had to choose. Rush to the pharmacy and try to sort out Mom's medications, risking more documentation of my obsessive behavior. Go to the house and confront Anthony, definitely violating the restraining order. Or stay here with Sarah and try to file our own emergency motions before the courthouse closed. Sarah pulled me into a conference room. She'd reviewed my files while I was gone. The evidence was compelling, but needed proper legal framework. We had 2 hours before the courthouse stopped, accepting filings. She could prepare emergency guardianship papers, but I'd need to get them notarized and filed myself. She couldn't appear in court without supervising attorney approval. We worked frantically. She typed while I organized exhibits. Medical, records, bank statements, the APS report from Grandma's case. My phone kept buzzing, the pharmacy again. They'd filled Mom's medications but couldn't release them without guardian consent. If she missed tonight's doses, the withdrawal could trigger seizures. I made another choice. Left Sarah typing, drove to the pharmacy. The pharmacist recognized me, her face sympathetic but firm. She couldn't override the guardian restrictions. I begged, explained about the anti-seizure medications. She glanced around, then leaned closer. Anthony had called that morning, warned them about my concerning fixation on his sister's medications, suggested I might try to steal them. The security guard watched me now. Every second I stayed added to Anthony's narrative. The desperate teenager who couldn't accept reality. I left empty-handed. Mom's medication sat in white bags behind the counter, 20 feet away, but utterly untouchable. Back at legal aid, Sarah had finished the draft motions. 20 pages of legal arguments, supported by evidence, but the notary had left for lunch. The backup was in court. We had 90 minutes to get everything notarized and filed. Sarah knew someone at the bank next door. The bank parking lot was full. Inside, the line stretched to the door. Business customers, Social Security check day. We waited, watching minutes tick by. My phone buzzed, a photo from my cousin, Anthony's car in Mom's driveway, him carrying boxes inside. When we finally reached the notary, she examined every page carefully, verified my ID twice, asked if I was signing under duress. The process took 20 minutes, 70 minutes until courthouse closing. The courthouse metal detector line wrapped around the building. Criminal hearings had run long. Lawyers with rolling briefcases, families in their best clothes. We inched forward. 60 minutes left. My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice, nervous. She'd been at the pharmacy, heard my conversation. She was a hospice nurse, had seen situations like this before. She gave me her number, said to call if I needed a witness. The first stranger to offer help in months. 50 minutes until closing when we finally cleared. Security. The clerk's office was on the 3rd floor. Elevators were down for maintenance. We climbed stairs, my evidence box growing heavier with each step. Sarah wheezed beside me, her asthma acting up from stress. The clerk's office was chaos, end-of-day rush, attorneys filing last-minute motions. We took a number. 47. They were serving 32. The clock showed 40 minutes until closing. 2 clerks worked the windows. Maybe 3 minutes per customer if everything went smoothly. My cousin texted again. Anthony was photographing things in Mom's room, taking her jewelry box, loading photo albums, creating his version of a caring family member, gathering mementos. Each item he touched was evidence disappearing. Number 41. 25 minutes left. Sarah gripped my hand. We'll make it. We have to make it. Then one clerk put up a next window sign. Lunch break. Only one window now. The line slowed to a crawl. My phone buzzed. The school counselor. She'd noticed my absences. Is everything okay at home? Do you need resources? Another adult who might help, but explaining would take time I didn't have. I texted back that I'd call tomorrow. Number 45. 10 minutes until closing. The clerk worked methodically, stamping documents, checking fees. No rushing allowed in legal filings. Every error meant rejection. Starting over. Another day lost. Number 46. 5 minutes. Sarah whispered prayers under her breath. The woman ahead of us argued about filing fees. Didn't have exact change. The clerk called a supervisor. My chest felt crushed. Mom would miss another night of medications. Another night of Anthony's neglect. Number 47. We rushed to the window. I pushed papers through the slot, hands shaking. The clerk examined each page, checked the notarization, verified. The case number asked for the filing fee. I fumbled for my wallet. We close in 2 minutes, she said, not unkindly. If there are any errors, you'll need to come back tomorrow. She scanned pages, stopped at page 15. A notary seal was smudged, barely visible. She called the supervisor. They huddled, examining the document. The clock hit 5 p.m. Closing time. The supervisor sighed. The seal was technically legible. She'd accept it this once. The clerk stamped our filing. Emergency hearing scheduled for next week. 7 days. Mom had to survive 7 more days. Sarah hugged me in the lobby. She'd done what she could, gave me her personal cell, told me to document everything. Stay away from the house. Let the legal system work. Don't give Anthony more ammunition. I sat in my car afterward, holding the filed copies. 7 days felt like a lifetime. My phone had 17 missed calls. The pharmacy, the school, 3 from Nancy, 1 from an unknown number that left a voicemail. I played it. Anthony's voice. Fake concern dripping through the speakers. He'd heard I'd been to legal aid, hoped I was getting help for my issues. Mentioned he'd installed security cameras at the house for Mom's safety. Of course, any uninvited visitors would be prosecuted. Another text, this time a screenshot. My desperate messages to Mom's phone over the last week, begging her to remember me, telling her I'd save her, promising Dad I'd protect her. Out of context, they looked unhinged, the ramblings of an obsessed teenager refusing to accept reality. The final text was just words. You should have stayed away, kid. This ends with one of us destroyed. Guess which one? I knew then what the next 7 days would bring. Not a legal battle between guardian and teenager. Something worse. A war where truth meant nothing if you couldn't prove it. Where being right meant nothing if no one believed you. Where love looked like obsession and protection looked like harassment. Anthony had done this before, gotten away with it. Now he had practice. Had the system on his side. Had Mom trapped in that house while her medication sat locked away. Had 7 days to finish what he started. But I had evidence. I had Sarah's help. I had Nancy willing to testify. I had a hospice nurse's phone number. I had the truth, even if it was buried under his lies. I had to believe that somewhere in this broken system, someone would see what was really happening. 7 days. Mom had to survive. 7 days. I started my car knowing I couldn't go near the house, couldn't check on her, couldn't do anything but wait and document and hope. The restraining order made me a criminal for loving my mother. The guardianship made him a hero for killing his. Only one of us would survive this intact. He was right about that. But he'd forgotten something important. I'd already lost everything that mattered. My dad, my home, my future, my mother, piece by piece. I had nothing left to lose except her life, and that made me dangerous in ways he hadn't calculated. Because desperate people with nothing to lose don't follow rules. They find other ways, legal ways, painful ways, but ways that work. 7 days to save my mother. 7 days to destroy my uncle. 7 days to prove that family isn't about blood or money or power. It's about showing up, fighting back, refusing to let evil win just because it knows how to file paperwork. The war for my mother's life had officially begun, and I intended to win. The next morning, I woke in my car behind a gas station, neck cramped from sleeping against the window. My phone showed 12 missed calls, 3 from the pharmacy, 4 from school, 5 from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all and drove to the library, the only place with free Wi-Fi where I could research without being tracked. The librarian recognized me from years of study sessions. She nodded toward the back computers away from the main area. I settled in and started searching. First, I needed to understand Anthony's patterns. His social media showed a carefully curated life. Photos at Mom's bedside, holding her hand. Posts about the burden of caring for family. Comments flooded in with prayers and support. I dug deeper, found his girlfriend's profile. Alexandra, a waitress at the casino where he gambled. Her Instagram showed expensive gifts he couldn't afford on disability. Designer purses, jewelry, weekend trips, all posted within the last month, right after he gained control of Mom's finances. My former foster mom's name appeared in his recent friend additions. My chest tightened. She'd taken me in after Dad died, before I aged out of the system. Now her profile showed photos with Anthony at coffee shops. Her status updates mentioned a new boyfriend who understood the challenges of raising troubled teens. I screenshotted everything, building my digital evidence file. Then I saw it. A photo from 2 days ago. Anthony and my foster mom at dinner. In the background, barely visible, was a folder labeled with my name. My psychiatric records from grief counseling. The library's printer cost 10 cents per page. I had $3 in change. Carefully, I selected the most damning evidence. As pages printed, I noticed a man watching from the magazine section. The same man from the pharmacy yesterday. He pretended to read, but kept glancing over. I gathered my prints and left through the back exit. Drove 3 blocks before pulling over to check for followers. Paranoid behavior. Exactly what Anthony wanted people to see, but I couldn't stop. Every shadow might be someone reporting back to him. The foster care office was my next stop. I needed to warn my former foster mom about Anthony. The receptionist remembered me, her smile fading when I mentioned his name. She made a quick call. My foster mom would see me, but only for 5 minutes. She met me in the lobby, wouldn't invite me to her office. Her expression was guarded, arms crossed. I tried explaining about Anthony's history with Grandma. She cut me off, told me Anthony had already shared my concerning behavior. How? I'd blamed everyone when Dad died. The paranoid accusations against paramedics, my refusal to accept help. I showed her the photos of Grandma, the APS report. She barely glanced at them. Said grief made people see patterns that weren't there. Anthony had shown her my old texts from counseling, the ones where I'd wished Mom would die so I could have a normal teenage life. Taken out of context, they looked monstrous. She stood to leave. Mentioned Anthony was helping her understand my issues. He'd offered to pay for specialized therapy for her current foster kids, wanting to prevent another situation like mine. I realized then that he'd turned her into a character witness against me. Back in my car, I fought the urge to scream. Every move I made strengthened his narrative, the desperate teenager spiraling out of control. I drove to the one place that might still help, the hospital where Mom had worked. The parking garage security recognized me, waved me through with a sympathetic nod. Inside, I headed for the surgical unit. Nancy's shift started in an hour, but other nurses who'd known Mom might talk to me. The break room was nearly empty. Just one nurse I vaguely recognized. She stiffened when she saw me. Word had spread. The unstable kid harassing staff. I started to explain, but she held up her hand, walked out without a word. I waited in the hallway. More nurses arrived for shift change. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered to each other, glancing my way. Then security appeared, 2 guards I'd known since childhood. They looked uncomfortable as they explained I'd been reported for trespassing. Hospital administration had received complaints about me targeting staff. They escorted me out gently, apologizing quietly. One mentioned that Nancy had called in sick. Strange timing, just like Denise. Anyone who might help me suddenly had emergencies. In the parking garage, I found a note under my windshield. Stop or she pays. No signature needed. I crumpled it, then smoothed it out. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. My phone rang. The school counselor. I'd missed the mandatory meeting about my absences. They'd have to report me to child services. I tried explaining I was 18, aged, out of the system. She said it didn't matter. I was still enrolled, still their responsibility. Another mark against me in official records. I drove aimlessly, trying to think. Anthony had anticipated every move, poisoned every well of support. But he'd made one mistake. He'd shown my foster mom my counseling records. Those were supposed to be sealed. Only someone with legal authority could access them. The courthouse records office was still open. I searched guardian documentation, found what I needed. Anthony had filed for access to my records, claiming I was a danger to Mom. The judge had granted it, based on the harassment filing. But the order was dated 2 days before he'd officially filed the harassment complaint. A clerical error. A slip-up that proved premeditation. I made copies, hands shaking with excitement. Finally, proof of his manipulation. Outside, I called Sarah's personal cell. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice cautious. I explained what I'd found. She went quiet, then told me to be careful. Anthony's lawyer had filed a motion claiming I was stalking him. Security footage from multiple locations, the pharmacy, the courthouse, even the parking garage where I'd just been. She advised me to stay away from anywhere Anthony might be, build my case quietly, don't give him more ammunition. The hearing was in 6 days. I had to last until then. That night, I parked behind a different gas station, ate crackers from a vending machine. Tried not to think about Mom alone in that house. My phone buzzed, a text from my cousin. Mom had fallen again. Anthony called an ambulance. She was at the hospital. Every instinct screamed to race there, hold her hand, make sure she was safe. But that's what he wanted. Security footage of me violating the restraining order at the hospital. I forced myself to stay put. Instead, I called the hospice nurse who'd offered help. She answered immediately. Said she'd check on Mom. Report back. An hour later, she called. Mom was dehydrated, confused, but stable. Anthony was there, playing, the devoted brother. Staff were impressed by his dedication. She'd overheard him on the phone. Something about power of attorney paperwork. Mentioned a deadline. The nurse couldn't get closer without raising suspicion, but she'd keep watching. I spent the night researching power of attorney laws, found what he was planning. If Mom was declared incompetent by 2 doctors, he could expand his authority, control everything, not just medical decisions. The house, the settlement funds still. In trust. Everything Dad had protected. Morning came with more missed calls. This time from Nancy. I called back immediately. She whispered, glancing around her living room. Someone had called her supervisor, claimed she was sharing confidential patient information. An investigation was pending. Her nursing license was at risk. She couldn't testify now. Couldn't risk her career. She had kids to support. But she told me something important. Mom's former doctor, the one who'd treated her after the accident, had kept private notes, off-the-record observations about her mental state. He'd retired to Florida, but might still have them. I thanked her, promised to keep her name out of everything. Another ally lost, but at least she'd given me a lead. I looked up the doctor, found his retirement community, called the main office. He was traveling but would return in a week. After the hearing. Frustrated, I drove to the library again. The same man from yesterday sat in the magazine section. This time, I confronted him. Asked why he was following me. He looked startled, then sad. Introduced himself as Jonathan. His mother had dementia. He'd overheard me at the pharmacy, recognized the desperation in my voice. He'd been through something similar with his brother. Lost everything trying to protect their mother. Wanted to warn me that the system wasn't designed for situations like ours. The burden of proof was too high. Families could destroy each other while judges followed procedures. He gave me his card, a social worker specializing in elder abuse. Said he couldn't officially help while the case was pending, but he could listen. Sometimes that was enough, the first person in days to show genuine understanding. I spent the afternoon calling Mom's old colleagues. Most wouldn't talk. Those who did spoke carefully, mentioned Anthony had contacted them. Warned about liability issues. One nurse near retirement agreed to meet me, but only in public, only for coffee. We met at a busy cafe downtown. She kept her voice low, eyes scanning the room. Told me Mom had been terrified of Anthony for years. After Grandma died, she'd installed locks on her bedroom door, started hiding money, small amounts, emergency funds in case she needed to run. The nurse had helped her open a separate bank account off the books. Mom had deposited small amounts for years. The account might still exist. She gave me the bank name, branch location, warned me to be careful. Anthony had connections everywhere. I thanked her, promised discretion. As she left, I noticed a woman at the corner table taking photos. Not of me, of the nurse. My stomach sank. Even this conversation would be twisted into harassment. The bank was closing when I arrived. The manager listened to my story with sympathy but firm boundaries. Without power of attorney or Mom's presence, he couldn't confirm or deny any accounts. Privacy laws. I understood, but felt another door closing. That evening, I sat in a park, updating my evidence files, organizing everything for the hearing. My phone rang. Anthony's number. I almost didn't answer, then worried about. Mom hit accept. His voice was different. Tired. He asked if I was happy, if destroying the family helped me sleep. I stayed silent. He continued. Said Mom had been asking for me, crying at night. He was considering a supervised visit. 1 hour, if I admitted. I'd misunderstood the situation. The offer hung between us. 1 hour with Mom. All I had to do was sign a paper admitting my accusations were grief-driven delusions, give him the legal ammunition to destroy my credibility forever. I told him I'd think about it. He gave me 24 hours. I called the social worker, Jonathan. Asked his advice. He sighed. Said it was a classic manipulation. Sign the paper and I'd lose any chance at the hearing. But refusing meant Mom suffered. No good choice, just degrees of bad. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept thinking about Mom crying for me, wondering if I was there. 6 days until the hearing. But what if she didn't last that long? What if my fight to save her was actually killing her faster? Morning brought a new crisis. My bank account was frozen. A legal hold pending investigation of theft charges. Anthony had filed a claim saying I'd stolen money from him. The small amounts I'd taken for Mom's medications. He had receipts, security footage from ATMs, another piece of evidence against me. Without money, I couldn't buy gas. Couldn't eat. Couldn't print documents. I had $12 in my wallet and a quarter tank of fuel. The hearing was 5 days away. I called Sarah. She couldn't help financially, but suggested legal aid emergency funds. The application would take days, too long. I thanked her anyway. Added poverty to my list of obstacles. Desperate, I did something I'd sworn I wouldn't. Called my sister. We hadn't spoken since Dad's funeral. She'd married young, moved across the country, built a life far from our family chaos. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was cautious but not cold. She'd heard about the situation. Anthony had called her too. Painted his picture of me losing control. But she remembered Mom's fear of him, the locks on doors, the hidden money. She couldn't come back. Couldn't risk her kids' stability. But she could send a little money, enough for gas and food. I broke down crying. First tears in weeks. She stayed on the line, not speaking, just present. When I could breathe again, she told me something important. Mom had given her a box years ago. Important papers. She'd never opened it, respecting Mom's privacy. But maybe now was the time. She'd overnight it to the library. General delivery should arrive in 2 days, 3 days before the hearing. I thanked her, promised to protect her name. Another ally, distant, but real. The money hit my account that afternoon. $200. Enough to survive but not thrive. I filled my tank, bought protein bars and water, prepared for the final push. My phone buzzed. The pharmacy again. Mom's medications would expire in 48 hours. After that, they'd have to destroy them and wait for new prescriptions. The pharmacist's voice held apology. She was following protocol, but knew the cost. I drove past Mom's house that night. Couldn't stop. Couldn't get close, but I needed to see. The lights were on in her room. Shadows moved behind curtains. Was she walking, pacing, looking for me? A car pulled up behind me. Not police. Anthony's girlfriend, Alexandra. She got out, approached my window. I tensed, ready to drive away. But her expression wasn't hostile, just tired. She leaned against my car, lit a cigarette, said Anthony was getting worse. The drinking, the paranoia. He kept talking about the hearing, how he'd destroy me, but also about Mom, how she wouldn't stop crying, wouldn't eat, just stared at the door waiting. Alexandra had tried to help, sneak Mom extra food, sit with her, but Anthony got jealous, accused her of taking sides. She was scared of him, of what he might do, but also trapped. He'd paid off her credit cards, helped with her daughter's medical bills. Classic control. She dropped her cigarette, crushed it carefully. Said Mom had moments of clarity. Yesterday, she'd grabbed Alexandra's hand, begged her to find me, tell me she was sorry, that she loved me, that she knew Dad would protect me. I asked Alexandra to testify. She shook her head. Couldn't risk losing custody of her daughter, but she'd watch, try to document things, small rebellions, all she could manage. She walked back to her car, shoulders bent with shared defeat. 4 days until the hearing. I parked at a rest stop, tried to sleep. Dreams came in fragments. Mom calling my name, Dad shaking his head, Anthony laughing. I woke to knocking on my window, a state trooper checking on me. I explained I was traveling, too tired to drive. He nodded, told me to be safe. Small mercy. Morning brought the package from my sister. I signed for it at the library, hands trembling. Inside the box were letters, Mom's handwriting, addressed, to me but never sent, dating back years before Dad died. Before the accident changed everything. I read them in order. Her fears about Anthony, how he'd manipulated Grandma, isolated her, the guilt Mom carried for not stopping him sooner, but also her hope that someday he'd get help, accept treatment, become the brother she remembered from childhood. The final letter was different. Written after Dad's diagnosis. She knew she was getting worse. Knew Anthony would come eventually, but she trusted the system. Trusted that truth would win. Asked me to be strong, to fight but not be consumed. To remember love was stronger than hate. I sat in that library surrounded by her words and felt something shift. This wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about honoring her wishes, fighting with love, not just anger, being the person she'd raised me to be. 3 days left. I called Jonathan, asked about mediation, ways to help Anthony while protecting Mom. He was surprised but supportive, gave me resources, addiction programs, gambling support, things to present at the hearing, show the judge I wanted healing, not just victory. I spent the day building a different case, one that acknowledged Anthony's pain, his legitimate grievances about caring for Grandma alone, the addiction that drove his choices, but also the danger he posed, the need for intervention. Protection for Mom, but help for him. Sarah called that evening, impressed by the new approach, said judges responded better to solutions than accusations. We refined the presentation, added treatment requirements, supervised visits, financial oversight, but not complete exclusion. A path forward for everyone. My phone rang, unknown number. I answered carefully. A man's voice, nervous. He'd been at the casino, seen Anthony losing heavily. Heard him talking about life insurance, how it would solve everything. The man was in recovery himself, recognized the dangerous thinking, wanted to warn someone. I thanked him, added his number to my witness list. Another stranger choosing to help. The universe balancing Anthony's cruelty with unexpected kindness. 2 days until the hearing. I woke to texts from Alexandra, photos she'd taken secretly. Mom's medications lined up but unopened, dates showing missed doses, food untouched on trays, small evidences of neglect that painted a larger picture. I forwarded everything to Sarah. She was building the final presentation. Said we had a strong case, not perfect, but compelling. The judge would have to listen, consider, decide. That afternoon, I did something risky. Drove to the adult daycare Mom used to attend. The director remembered her fondly. I explained the situation, asked if they'd accept her back if the guardianship changed. She said yes. Had missed Mom's presence. Would testify to her previous stability under proper care. Another piece falling into place. Building a future beyond the hearing. Showing the judge I had plans, support systems, everything Mom needed to thrive. 1 day left. I sat in my car, organizing everything. Testimony from the daycare, Jonathan's mediation resources, Alexandra's photos, my sister's letters, the pharmacy records, the clerical error proving premeditation. Not overwhelming evidence, but enough. Maybe. My phone rang, Anthony again. His 24-hour deadline had passed days ago, but he was calling anyway, hammered from the sound of it, rambling about family, how I destroyed everything, how Mom would be better off dead than with me. I recorded it. More evidence, but also genuinely concerning. He was spiraling, the pressure of the hearing, the weight of his choices, all crashing down. I worried about Mom, what he might do in desperation. I called Alexandra, asked her to check on them. She texted back an hour later. Anthony had passed out in his chair. Mom was alone in her room talking to photos of Dad. Safe for now, but vulnerable. The final night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Parked outside a church, watching late-night services through stained glass windows, praying to Dad, to whatever force might listen. Not for victory, but for wisdom, for strength, for Mom. To survive whatever came next. Dawn broke gray and uncertain. I showered at a truck stop, put on my only clean clothes, drove to the courthouse early. Sarah met me outside. We reviewed everything one last time. She squeezed my shoulder, said she was proud of me. Win or lose, I'd fought with honor. Inside, the hallway filled with familiar faces. Nancy, despite the risk to her license. Jonathan with a folder of resources. The daycare director. Alexandra, nervous but present. Even the pharmacist, ready to testify about medication concerns. Then Anthony arrived. Suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. His lawyer whispered urgently, trying to compose him. He saw me. Our eyes met across the hallway. For a moment, I saw not the monster, but the broken man. The uncle who'd once taught me to ride a bike, who'd carried Grandma's coffin with tears streaming down his face. The bailiff called our case. We filed into the courtroom, Mom's life hanging in the balance. 7 days of war condensed into whatever happened next. I gripped my evidence folder, thought of her letters, of Dad's strength, of love being stronger than hate. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The hearing that would determine everything was about to begin. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Just 2 rows of benches, a judge's bench, and tables for each side. Sarah had explained the process. This wasn't a trial, just a hearing to determine guardianship. The judge would review evidence, hear testimony, then decide who could best protect Mom. Anthony's lawyer spoke first, painted me as unstable. Showed security footage from multiple locations, the pharmacy confrontation, my outburst at legal aid, the restraining order violations. Each piece built their narrative of a disturbed teenager refusing to accept reality. The judge took notes, expression neutral. Asked about my school attendance, my living situation, why I'd been sleeping in my car. Every answer I gave, filtered, through Sarah, sounded worse out loud. Yes, I'd missed months of school. Yes, I was homeless. Yes, I'd broken into Anthony's house multiple times. Then they presented my texts to Mom's phone. Dozens of desperate messages begging her to remember me, promising to save her. The judge's eyebrows raised at the intensity, asked if I'd sought counseling for my grief. I had to admit I'd stopped going after Dad died. Anthony took the stand next, transformed into the caring brother. Explained how he'd stepped up when no one else would, how I'd made caregiving impossible with my interference. He even cried when describing Mom's confusion, her fear when I'd broken in at night. His lawyer presented financial records, showed Anthony had spent thousands on Mom's care, medical supplies, special foods, home modifications. They glossed over the casino withdrawals, focusing on receipts that looked legitimate. Even I had to admit the paper trail seemed convincing. The judge asked about Mom's medications. Anthony had an answer for everything. Some pills made her agitated, so he reduced doses. Others caused nausea, so he tried alternatives. He documented every change, every reason, made his neglect look like thoughtful care. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. Our turn was coming, but watching Anthony perform, I understood why the system had failed Grandma. Lies told with conviction sounded more believable than complicated truths. We started with the clerical error. The judge examined the dates, frowning, asked Anthony's lawyer to explain. They claimed it was a simple mistake. The clerk had misdated the filing. Happened all the time. Without the original clerk to testify, we couldn't prove otherwise. Next came Grandma's records, the APS report from 15 years ago. The judge read carefully, but Anthony's lawyer objected. Ancient history, no relevance to the current situation. People change. Anthony had been young, overwhelmed. The judge allowed it, but seemed skeptical of its weight. Sarah presented the pharmacy records, showed Mom's medications going unfilled, but Anthony had explanations. He'd switched pharmacies for better prices. Some medications were discontinued by doctors. Others were filled at the hospital pharmacy during her recent visit. More paper trails that muddied the truth. The hospice nurse testified about Mom's condition when hospitalized. Dehydration, confusion, possible medication withdrawal. But under cross-examination, she admitted she hadn't examined Mom directly. Couldn't say definitively what caused her symptoms. Elderly dementia patients often had similar issues. Alexandra surprised everyone by showing up. Anthony's face darkened as she took the stand. She spoke carefully, glancing at him frequently, confirmed he'd been absent during Mom's care, that she'd found Mom alone, crying. But when pressed for details, she hedged. Couldn't remember exact dates, hadn't documented anything officially. The photos she'd taken were admitted as evidence. Mom's medications lined up but unopened, food trays untouched. But Anthony's lawyer argued they showed he was providing medications and meals, that Mom's refusal to take them wasn't neglect, but typical dementia behavior. Jonathan testified as an expert witness, explained patterns of elder abuse, how isolation and financial exploitation often went unnoticed. But Anthony's lawyer challenged his credentials. He wasn't Mom's social worker, had never officially assessed the situation. His testimony was opinion, not fact. The daycare director spoke about Mom's previous stability, how she thrived, in structured environments with proper medication management. Offered to take her back immediately, but Anthony's lawyer pointed out she had financial incentive. The daycare would profit from Mom's return. Nancy risked everything to testify. Explained Mom's fear of Anthony going back years, the locks on doors, the hidden money. But under questioning, she admitted Mom had also been paranoid about other things. Thought neighbors were stealing her mail, believed the TV was watching her. Fear of Anthony could be another delusion. The judge reviewed Mom's letters to me, read them silently while the courtroom waited, asked when they were written. Most were years old before her mental decline accelerated. He questioned their current relevance. People's wishes change, especially as dementia progresses. Anthony's lawyer called my former foster mom. She testified about my behavior after Dad died, the anger, the accusations against paramedics, my refusal to accept help. Said she'd tried everything, but I'd pushed everyone away. Now I was doing the same thing with Anthony. She mentioned my old therapy records. The judge asked to see them. I watched him read my teenage words, wishing Mom would die, feeling trapped, resenting the caregiving burden. Out of context, they painted me as resentful, unstable. Exactly what Anthony needed. The school counselor testified by phone, confirmed my excessive absences, my declining grades, the missed meetings. Said she'd tried to help, but I'd been unresponsive. Another caring adult I'd apparently rejected. Anthony's gambling came up briefly. His lawyer admitted he had a problem, but he was seeking help, attending meetings, working with a sponsor. Everyone deserved second chances. Addiction was a disease, not a character flaw. The judge nodded sympathetically. My cousin testified reluctantly, confirmed Anthony had been at the house during critical times, but also admitted I'd asked her to spy on him, that I'd seemed obsessed, paranoid. She wanted to help, but didn't know who to believe anymore. The judge asked about Mom's current doctor. Why wasn't he testifying? Sarah explained he required Anthony's consent as legal guardian, a catch-22 that perfectly illustrated our problem. The person suspected of abuse controlled access to the evidence. Anthony's lawyer presented character witnesses, neighbors, who'd seen him helping Mom, church members who praised his dedication, the mailman who'd watched him assist her to appointments. A carefully curated image of a devoted caregiver. Then came the financial evidence. Bank records showing Anthony's withdrawals, but also showing Mom had given him access years ago, had signed papers authorizing him to manage her accounts. What looked like theft might be legitimate, if questionable. Use of granted authority. The judge took a recess, 15 minutes to review everything. Sarah hugged me in the hallway, whispering encouragement. but I saw the truth in her eyes. We'd presented facts, but Anthony had presented a story. Stories were more powerful than evidence. Alexandra approached during the break, apologized for hedging her testimony, said Anthony had threatened to report her to child services, claimed she was an unfit mother. She had to protect her daughter. First, I understood. Another person trapped by his manipulations. Nancy looked exhausted. Mentioned the hospital had already scheduled her disciplinary hearing. Win or lose today, she'd face consequences for testifying. But she squeezed my shoulder, said Mom would be proud. That doing right mattered more than outcomes. The judge returned, began his ruling by acknowledging the case's complexity, praised both sides for their obvious concern for Mom's welfare, said these family situations were always difficult. No clear villains or heroes, just people trying their best under impossible circumstances. He addressed the evidence systematically. The grandmother's case was concerning, but too old to prove current patterns. The medication issues were troubling but not definitively neglectful. The financial concerns were complicated by Mom's prior authorization. Each piece of our case dismantled by reasonable doubt. My behavior, however, showed clear patterns. School truancy, restraining order violations, breaking and entering, living in my car rather than seeking appropriate help. These weren't the actions of a stable guardian. They suggested someone overwhelmed by grief, unable to accept difficult realities. The judge commended my love for Mom, said it was obvious I cared deeply, but caring wasn't enough. She needed stable, consistent care from someone with resources and maturity, someone who could work within systems, not against them. He noted Anthony's admitted flaws. The gambling addiction needed addressing, suggested mandatory counseling and financial oversight, but these were manageable issues. Anthony had a home, a support system, experience caring for elderly relatives. Most importantly, he was already Mom's legal guardian. The ruling came down like a hammer. Guardianship would remain with Anthony, but with modifications, monthly, reports to the court, required addiction counseling, a financial conservator to oversee Mom's money, and surprisingly, supervised visits for me, 1 hour weekly, if I followed certain conditions. Those conditions felt like chains: complete a grief counseling program, maintain stable housing, no contact outside supervised visits. Any violations would result in permanent no-contact orders. The judge called it a compassionate compromise. I called it a death sentence for Mom. Anthony's lawyer smiled, shaking hands with his client. Anthony himself looked tired, not triumphant. Caught my eye across the courtroom. Something passed between us. Not victory or defeat, just exhaustion. Two people broken by the same system, fighting over scraps of control. Sarah promised to appeal. Said we had grounds, but appeals took months. Cost money I didn't have. Meanwhile, Mom would remain in that house, taking whatever medications Anthony decided, eating whatever he provided, waiting for visits that might never come. Outside the courthouse, Jonathan offered his card again, said his door was always open. The daycare director promised to check on Mom whenever possible. Small comforts that felt hollow against the magnitude of loss. Alexandra waited by my car, handed me an envelope. Inside were photos she'd taken that morning. Mom in her nightgown, staring at a photo of Dad and me. The last clear picture I'd have for who knew how long. She drove away without words. Another casualty of Anthony's war. I sat in my car holding the ruling papers. 7 days of fighting reduced to legal language. Mom's life decided by strangers who'd never seen her laugh. Never watched her save lives in the OR. Never felt her hand checking for fever or her voice singing lullabies. The conditions for visits started immediately. I had 72 hours to find stable housing, enroll in counseling, prove I could be the stable, compliant person the court demanded. Part of me wanted to run, take Mom, and disappear. But that would only prove Anthony right. Instead, I drove to the library, used their phone to call homeless shelters, found one with an opening but a 2-week wait, called others, finally found a room at a halfway house. Not ideal, but it met the court's definition of stable. First box checked. The counseling requirement was harder. Most programs had waiting lists. Insurance I didn't have, but the hospital social worker remembered. Mom made calls. Found a grief support group that counted as counseling. Another box checked through the kindness of strangers. Within 48 hours, I'd met the basic requirements. Sarah filed the paperwork. The first visit was scheduled for the following Tuesday. 1 hour, supervised by a court appointee, but it was something. A foot in the door, a chance to see Mom even if I couldn't save her. I spent the remaining days preparing, bought her favorite tea, found photos of Dad to bring, practiced what I'd say. How to make 1 hour count when it might be all we had. The grief counselor said to focus on connection, not confrontation. To be present, not angry. Tuesday arrived, gray and drizzling. I met the supervisor at a neutral location, a community center that smelled like coffee and old books. She explained the rules. No discussing the case. No criticizing Anthony. No upsetting Mom with talk of the past. Just be present. Create positive memories. Anthony brought Mom 20 minutes late. She looked smaller, her hair unwashed, wearing mismatched clothes, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. Called my name. Reached out with shaking hands. The supervisor had to remind me about physical contact limits. Brief hugs only. We sat at a small table. I made her tea while she studied my face, asked where I'd been, why I hadn't visited. I couldn't explain about restraining orders and legal battles. Just said I'd been sick, but was better now. She accepted it with the trust of a child. She talked about Dad, how he'd been by yesterday. Brought her flowers. I didn't correct her. Didn't mention he'd been dead 3 years. Just nodded. Asked about the flowers. Let her live in whatever reality brought comfort. The supervisor approved with a small smile. Mom showed me her notebook. Pages of scribbled words. Some legible, most not. But she was proud of them. Said she was writing Dad letters, keeping him updated about her days. I praised her handwriting, helped her spell a few words, normal moments in an abnormal situation. When she dozed off mid-sentence, I just held her hand, watched her breathe, memorized her face. The supervisor let me have those quiet minutes, small mercy in a harsh system. Time passed too quickly. Soon, Anthony returned, checking his watch. Mom woke confused, didn't want to leave, clung to my hand until the supervisor gently intervened. Anthony had to practically carry her out. She called for me the whole way. The sound followed me home. Would follow me forever. But I'd see her again next week and the week after, as long as it took. I'd jump through every hoop, meet every requirement, play by every rule, not because the system was fair, but because Mom needed me. And sometimes love meant accepting unfair terms. The war was over. Anthony had won. But battles remained. Small ones, weekly visits, watching for signs of neglect, building a case for the future. Maybe someday things would change. Maybe Mom would outlive his control. Maybe justice would eventually come. For now, I had Tuesday afternoons. 1 hour to love her, to remind her she wasn't forgotten, to honor Dad's memory by showing up. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it was what the system allowed. And I'd take whatever scraps they gave me. Because that's what love looked like in broken systems. Not grand victories or dramatic rescues, just showing up week after week, playing by rules you didn't make. Accepting defeats while planning for tomorrow, protecting what you could within the limits you're given. Mom might never be free of Anthony, might die in that moldy house, but she'd know I fought for her. Know I never stopped loving her. And maybe that knowledge would bring comfort in her confusion. Maybe love could reach through dementia and legal barriers and family dysfunction. I drove home to my halfway house room, started my grief counseling homework, prepared for another week of compliance and patience. The war was over, but love continued. Quiet, persistent, undefeated even in defeat.